This is episode number 33, part 1 of Susie Castillo and I Have a Podcast. Yo and hello, I am Vinnie Potestivo. This is I Have a Podcast, and on today's episode, I get to introduce you to someone that I just known since day one that she was a star. She just stood out by being her beautiful, awesome, funny, naturally charming self, living her dream life in New York City on TRL. You know, we actually kind of got to live that dream life side by side for a couple of years together, and we launched a network together. Yeah, we launched MTV Tres together, and I'm talking about Susie Castillo, and I just can't wait to share this conversation with you.
I remember one time being in your office at MTV and we were talking about casting tapes and you were like, do you want to see your casting tape? And I was like, oh my God, I'd love to. I've never seen it. And you popped in the VHS tape and into your VCR in your office. And I watched it and I was horrified. I was like, Vinnie, I got this job because of that. It was like Susie on crack. So if there was ever, that was like the MTV version of Susie that, I got the job, but then, and I learned so much too, right? About being a host on MTV. I mean,
just managing your energy and volume.
Yes. All of that stuff. So it was such a great learning experience. And we had so much friggin' fun in New York. Matt and I still talk about it. We're like, holy shit. Like, the time that we lived in New York, like we friggin' lived in New York. Like it just, we did it right.
New York was living.
Oh my God.
Things were happening. And you had to be there for them to see it and be there. And
it was, I feel like we got to experience New York at its best, those years that I was at MTV and you're working in Times Square and I remember all the VJs. We hated coming to LA to do stuff in LA because we didn't get treated the same way. Like in New York, we were celebrities in New York. In Manhattan, I mean, Matt would call Nobu on a Saturday, at 3:00 in the afternoon and get us a table by just saying, oh, it's for Susie Castillo, MTV VJ. She's bringing Damien Faye or whoever else. And we'd get a table. They'd find a table for us, So it was stuff, like that, that whole celebrity treatment.
I get it. When I would go to LA, they'd be like, yeah, I'm in New York. I'm like, yeah, it's MTV. First off, working in New York, I loved working in entertainment in New York because most people are in finance or health or entertainment isn't the major, media. Certainly. Right. Media was nothing other than just cable networks. So we don't even have to have that conversation about all the other producers and creatives there are now.
Yeah.
And when we would go out, we would be out with bankers and we would be out with doctors and not traditional, media people. When we would go to LA, people would be like, what do you do for a living? And I would be like, oh, I'm from New York. And just leave it at that. But what do you do for a living? Oh no, I'm Vinnie. I'm from Staten Island. I live in Brooklyn. I live over by Jersey. So you ever see Sopranos? I would just divert, and they.
Sopranos.
So that's my reference of New York and New Jersey.
The Sopranos.
Sex in the City. Those words.
Yeah.
And I remember even when I was in New York, people would be like, "Well, what do you do for a living?" And I would be like, "I work on Broadway."
We did.
15 Broadway, right there. I'm not going to tell you I work at a cable network. How embarrassing, I thought to myself.
Oh my God.
That's so silly, the voices. The stories
it is.
We tell ourselves.
It sure is. There are stories. Wanted to work
at So we didn't meet until your audition process and things were already in line with you. And there was already, I think, courtesy of Danny Villa, right? Mm-hmm. My LA brother, the LA half of Vinnie Potestivo, and I'm the New York half of the Danny Villa equation. We literally complete each other's sentences and have amazing time volleying ideas and stars back and forth. But you had already won a title.
I did.
You had already had some momentum going. Did you know you wanted to work at MTV? Was that the place where you were like,
No, it wasn't even on my radar. I mean, I did the, Miss USA pageant and, was crossing my fingers that I would win because I knew that it would help me get to LA. And, growing up in Massachusetts, it's a long way to go, right? 3,000 miles across the country. Yep. But I knew that if I wanted to live out this dream of working in entertainment, I'd had to move out there. And when I did the pageant and won, 2 weeks later, I signed with William Morris Agency. And my focus was on acting, actually. I immediately got myself...
the second you said that, I remember that. Yep.
Yeah. And I started acting and booking like guest appearances on shows like My Wife and Kids, and another one called Half and Half, which funny enough is now on, I think, Hulu or something, because I was on there and I saw that I was thinking about those guest appearances that I did at like the first few acting jobs that I booked right after being Miss USA, like like within the first 6 months of moving here. And I'm like, I'm never going to get to see those because they're not on digital, like they didn't transfer them digitally. Well, they have. And I got to see like my first acting job ever, like a couple months ago. But yeah, and like I was doing well and I was excited for pilot season. And my agent, William Morris, called me and was like, hey, like MTV is interested in you potentially being the next VJ. Would you be interested in that? And I was like, are you kidding me? Like I rushed home every afternoon to watch Carson, on TRL. And it was such a huge part of like my, high school years, right? And then college years, like I never missed TRL. And so to me, I was like, okay, it's not acting, but that would be friggin' rad. And, next thing I know, I'm meeting Danny Villa and he's putting me on tape and sending it to New York, and the whole process started. And, before I knew it,
You're flown out to New York. Screen test in the studio. So you did a screen test in the TRL studio. Was that overwhelming? I did.
It was overwhelming.
You're on the set. Like this is like the show you're watching, rushing home as you're winning your crowns and getting ready to be the powerful exec you've turned into, and then you end up like, oh, wait, I'm in it.
It was crazy. I remember being on set by myself. It was just me on the stage and Wendy McSwain, kind of walking me through everything and having me do things over and finessing, what would my takes. Like turning around and looking out the window and seeing Times Square right outside and like, holy crap, that's the pit right there where all the kids scream with their signs. And like, it's just, it was super surreal, to be there. And, and I think it was like
during those auditions, sometimes I would walk with whoever it was, that we were looking at, and I'd go over to the window with them and point at people and wave at them. Because some people were afraid to do that. I'm like, no, this is the best part of being in the Concourse studios. It's who's making connections like this? It's weird. Now we have friends and followers and likes and the social media world. But we used to literally, if we were feeling a little bit down, because I sat in the Concourse studio for 2 years when I started off casting, which is now, I think, like the cruise section of Aeropostale.
It's
like how they changed so sad.
I can't. When I first saw that, I know. I'm like, how can this be? The photo booth.
How did Rob and Briani let this happen?
Oh, right. It's all Rob's fault. I love Rob too. Rob's the best.
Some good people. We work with really talented hair and makeup artists, and like Rob and Marielle and Darshan, like the amazing talented people we worked with in wardrobe that are like kind of it's like. It's cool to think we all started off at MTV and we were all just like super odd in our own. And like when you think about oddballs, we really were a group of people who were most likely to be at MTV. If you ask me, I knew theater.
Yes.
That was my strong suit.
That's right.
And boy bands, which I grew into.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But being at MTV was not something that I thought I wanted to do growing up. It's not a channel that I watched growing up. It wasn't.
Oh, you didn't even watch it?
A show. No, I liked Remote Control. I watched that growing up. Yeah. I watched Remote Control. To be honest,
MTV Raps?
We didn't have cable. We didn't have cable in the house for a really long time. And I kind of grew up more playing video games than watching music videos. And then with siblings that, the oldest of six, you get out of the house. Go to the park, take your siblings, go play stickball up at the school. You know what I mean? Come back when the street lights come on. So 10:30 to me was like when I had to have my homework done, because then I had to be prepared to be with my siblings. And I, Ananda was a person who stopped me one day on the street at MTV and gave me a chance to ask a question. And long story short, I was like, I can bring some more people back, and it worked out. And I started bringing audience members in for certain shows, and then they needed me to cast certain things for Tom Green and then say about karaoke. Those were sort of like, those were my shows that I moved up. But I never thought I would work at MTV. I thought it was so cool. I'm not a cool person. I'm kind of like a musical theater. I like my own unique things. I'm a little off the beaten path. I don't know the words to a lot of pop songs, especially after working. I'm so mad at this, especially after working at MTV, where I only know like the clean MTV version. Like I only know the clean lyrics to everything. Yeah. We would go out at night. You and I would go out at night to like the clubs, and we would hear the music, and I'd be like, "Wait, what?
That's what they say.
That's what they're playing on MTV too. I gotta call up Who's Still. I don't understand.
That's funny.
I just didn't realize. How much fun. First off, like I didn't go to school and go to spring break. I went to school and did choir tour. And I loved it, and I would do it again. So I didn't go to MTV because of the celebrities, and I didn't understand pop culture, and I really didn't know any piece of that. I just knew that what happened on MTV, people talked about. I knew that what happened on MTV at 3:30 on that show, or in even Say What Karaoke, or as I started working there for a little bit on some of the smaller things, and some of those segments would air and run, and people would really talk about it. And this is before AOL Music even started. So like things weren't shared. It was true word of mouth. And my friends from school were talking about like what I was doing at MTV. And I was like, how are you watching it already? Oh, the Tom Green show's on air. I'm like, well, I know it's live because I had to do it last night until 11 o'clock. And like, I have my perception, you know what I mean? My very limited Vinnie Potestivo perception of it. I'm so blown away at the timing of our career that we got to be in Times Square when the people showed up, millions of people, like that energy. How cool to go to work in like Times Square. Are you kidding? And you lived in it, by the way. Right. You lived in Midtown.
I did. I could walk to work.
Bad pieces of advice I gave you when you first moved to New York was like, you should live close to the studio so you can get here quicker. But also it's more centralized to like where we got to go socially and kind of be connected. We did have car service, and there was, it was safe. We didn't have security, but it was safe, everywhere we went. But did you love living in Times Square that close to MTV? Like,
I was far enough away. I was a block. I was on 11th and 43rd. So I was a block in from the West Side Highway. So I was just far enough from Times Square that that the madness of Times Square didn't affect me. What did more so than that was the fact that I lived close to the Lincoln Tunnel. That sucked because the traffic, the Lincoln Tunnel traffic was the worst. And like, on the week
from Jersey.
Yes. And Vinnie was Bridge and Tunnel. And
the smell. Right?
Yeah. And so I loved living over there because, one of the things that Matt and I did was we bought rollerblades when we were living in New York. And one of the, we loved on the weekends, like Saturday mornings, we'd wake up and we'd either take a cab up to Central Park and rollerblade around the entire circumference of Central Park, or we would just roll over to the West Side Highway and then go all the way down to the Statue of Liberty and back. And it was so much fun to to live in Manhattan and really experience it and hang out on the weekends like that, and it was just it was a lot of fun.
West Side Highway, like that's such a cool West Side part of Manhattan that you're talking about, when you can zip up and down New York and not be in the center, as you're saying, where Times Square is. And
yeah, but then at the same time, it was super convenient, right? Because I could walk to work, sometimes faster than car. I only used car service, actually. Like if we went back and looked at all the car service vouchers, I bet I was the VJ that used car service less, because I loved to walk. I would put on my, my headphones and listen to music and walk to work. And, it was only if it was bad weather, if it was downpouring, would I then call the car service, or, I don't know, or freezing.
The VJ. Yeah. I like that you said the VJ who used the car service last. When I started working at MTV, I think there was some overlap from the previous talent regime that was there prior to us. So one of the questions I always got every single time I got into the car was, "Are you Matt Pinfield?" I was always like, "What?" If you're not Pinfield, you're not, because we had on our we would have these like paper vouchers and a number printed on it because it had to go to a budget code. So my budget code was the talent budget code, and that apparently had a red flag in the system. So every time I got into a car, and I never got into a car without like 4 or 5 people because we were always going I was like,
yes, yeah.
Like the roundup guy, we got to be there by 11, so all of our friends can get in.
Yes, you were like,
respectfully, we know the game.
Yes.
Before the celebrities show up, we got to make sure we're in because our friends got to come in with us.
You're like the mayor. Rounded everything up. Rounded everyone up.
The more like the VJ consigliere. I like to refer to it. What do you want? You want to go to spa tonight, Sachi? Yeah, I got a guy. Yeah, I got a guy. Ruby Foos. I can call Imagine that Eugene Rem was the guy you would call to get a reservation at like Ruby Foos. How cool is like Eugene, what a sweetheart, and what a truly talented person he's.
Yes,
the culture we grew up with in New York.
Yeah, it was awesome. Tenjin.
And you experienced the Club Kids, right?
Yes,
like, there was like
a little bit. I feel like Club Kids was earlier, but they were still around. 100%.
They'd be in the clubs, and there was like that late night New York culture. Did you know you were moving to New York and you would stay as long as you did?
Yeah, I did know that. I knew that I would stay there until I was done with MTV. Yeah, because
you were there a long time at MTV.
Yeah, 2.5 years. Yeah, and then I had lived. That wasn't very long.
By the way, those are some good years. Those are my final 2 years, by the way, and that's probably why they feel like a lifetime for me. It took a long time to find you.
Anytime I think of those years, Vinny, it's like, because we did so much in such a short period of time, it always blows my mind that like it was only 2.5 years of my life, because it feels like it was easily like 5 or 7 years of my life, because I learned so much, what I did, what I experienced because I worked at MTV, and it was just extraordinary, It's extraordinary.
You're like on this network that you grew up watching, that as if that's not enough, you're on really cool shows that people still talk about. And as if that's not enough, you got to launch a network.
Yeah, that was really awesome. And it was super cool. Like in terms of, and I will say that like my culture was something that, was very much a part of, was alive in my household. My friends would joke all the time that whenever they would walk through our front door, it was like they were in Puerto Rico, and then they would leave and they were back in America, because I was in ESL classes till I was in 4th grade. I learned to speak Spanish first, and I learned English in school as if I were like an immigrant kid, and that's how I grew up. And, I didn't have I remember eating spinach for the first time when I started dating my now husband, Matt. I went to his family's house and I was eating this spinach and I was like, this is so good. What is this? And it was like and they all looked at me and I'm like, no, for real. They were like, you've never eaten spinach before like that? Like sauteed spinach with like butter and garlic. And I was like, no, but this is delicious. I'm like, Puerto Ricans don't eat sauteed spinach. Like, we eat plátanos and rice and beans and fried chicken, like fried pork chops, I'm like, that's what we eat. And so, culturally to be at MTV, and then when MTV Tres launched and they asked me to be a part of that, I was like, yes, it was just amazing, because I think, I'm still doing it. I'm still trying to break stereotypes with, back then it was, with Latinos and it's been amazing what the Black community has done. And I am still waiting for that to happen with the Latin community. But to your point, to be able to help launch that was awesome with Carlos Santos, who's still a friend.
I love it. I love, by the way, Carlos is so funny. I must have been in such a good mood today that I remember his audition. I remember every cheesy joke he made. I literally repeat them to the last day. I remember he was at the end of a commercial break and he was like, we'll be right back. Stay tuned, whatever. And he was like, stay tuned or don't, we can keep it casual. And if you decide you want to come back after 4 minutes, then, come back. But that's the stuff that impressed, when you're playing audition reels and when you're playing audition reels and Lily or Tony or the executives' offices, anything that's different is good. Anything that separates you from what everyone else is doing, any word I can put in there that makes them say, oh, that was the XYZ person, or in your case, oh, that's Susie. She's got a lot of energy, huh? I don't
the
remember
Latina
your audition being I don't remember it being crazy, but then you did mention who ran your audition, and I just sat there and I shook my head. Yes. I know I edited it, but I'm sure
you did. You put it together. Yeah, it was like, okay, let's do that again, but with more energy. Okay, I can do that, and then I would do it again with more energy. That's great. Let's up the energy just a little bit more. And when I watched that video, I was like, that's Susie on crack cocaine.
I always sort of like love that. And I really do felt like you were the missing piece to my little TRL cast, to our little family there, because when you came to MTV, I also feel like I stepped into a moment in my career where I was feeling pretty strong, but I loved that bond, this group of, and I know all respectfully, you VJs plus Vinnie, because I was the one who was like, I'll get us into the party. I'm using all your names to get us in. Yeah. I know who to talk to get us in. Yeah. And make sure we can be there. But it was a really special time. And
it was.
I think of when I think of my family years, those 2.5 years, like the 2004 to 2007 sort of period for me, where Christine Cowan became an executive. That's the first time someone that was an assistant or a coordinator to me had become, an executive. And now, by the way, and I know she's cast you. Oh, my accent just popped in on that one. I know she cast you. I know she
sure did.
Like, she's gotten to cast you. Rod's cast you again. Like you're a wonderful person to work with, and you show up. And
thanks, Ben.
And you get hired because you're you.
I always say, like, it's so crazy how my career has, what's happened with it, right? Because like I told you before, I didn't set out to be a host, I was focusing on acting. And even when my contract was up at MTV and I moved back to LA, I continued focus on acting again, but the hosting opportunities just kept coming to me, and they were all great jobs on great networks. I've hosted and done things as a host, as Susie, on so many different platforms, right? And had 2 radio shows or 3 radio shows at MTV, through MTV Radio. And then I hosted Randy Jackson's Hit List with Randy Jackson. Like I got to hang out in the studio with Randy every Thursday, and we recorded our show. Dude, it was so fun. So like all the opportunities that came after MTV, because of how visible I was, and because, I was allowed to be me and to love. I love people. I love talking to people. I always have. I used to get in trouble all the time. I was in detention constantly when I was a kid because I couldn't shut up. And my mom would just, get another note from the school, Susie has detention tomorrow. And she's like, Susie, again, why can't you just shut up and just listen to the teacher? I'm like, Mom, it's boring. It was boring. And so when I got my MTV job, I called my mom in tears. And I was like, Mom, they're going to pay me to talk. Like, that's my job, to talk. I said, see, all those detentions were just like practice for what I was going to end up doing. And it's like, the harder I've tried to act, the more the universe is like, no, you should be a host. And when I start to think about it, and that, what you said earlier was, I have to say thank you so much from the bottom of my heart, because that's the biggest compliment anybody can ever give me, as a host, is that people are not intimidated by me. They feel comfortable around me. I've gotten celebrities to say things about their personal lives. How producers, I did some work for the entertainment news shows, right? So like I've done stuff for Entertainment Tonight, Extra, and The Insider, which is no longer. But, I'll never forget, they sent me to a press junket to ask Charlize Theron questions. And one of the, she was dating Sean Penn at the time, and they wanted me to ask her questions about her and Sean. And I'm like, you guys, the producer, I'm at ET, and I'm like, she's going to go tell me to fly a kite, like, or she's just going to sit there and look at me like I'm an idiot. She doesn't talk about her personal life, right? And
there's going to be footage of her response, and it's not going to be good.
Right. Do you know that she answered my question?
I love that.
Yeah. And in the moment, I was shocked. I asked it because I was like, maybe she's feeling good today, even though I've never heard her talk about. And she meant the first thing out of her mouth was that she didn't want to, she didn't talk about personal things. And then a joke was made and we started laughing. And she was like, well, but the truth of the matter is that everything's great. And I was like, holy shit, she answered my question. Right. And we got our soundbite for like my segment. And I just, I was like proud of myself. And like, I patted myself in the back because I feel like, that's a feedback that I get often from folks is that, how comfortable they are around me. And I think it's because I truly do love people and I love talking to them and connecting with them. And because of that natural love that I have, I think that makes me a better host. And I also think that it, when some people could be really forceful asking a celebrity a personal question, I kind of come at it in a real human way and put myself in their shoes. And sometimes they end up answering the questions and the producers are happy.
I love that. And it's not, like your job is not, you've got someone in your ear, you've got someone holding cards sometimes, or you've got a script that you're going over 2 seconds before we go live, or you've got me in the corner and you're like, why is Vinnie on set? What's going on? Vinnie's on set.
Why is Vinnie here?
Something's happened. Yeah. Who's getting recast, or is his sister in the audience? That's the question. Always my sister in the audience, by the way, is the answer. But I can't imagine all the energy that goes on, right? And then as the host, it gets siphoned literally all through you. And everything about that last hour of rehearsal and things going wrong and the lights going off. And then all that energy has to go away because when you hit record, none of that happened. And you have this ability, you show up, you're present. Maybe it's a loud house where you're like, I don't have to scream to be heard. In fact, I'm going to talk like this until you all stop talking and then listen. And
I think, it's, I'm going to say this because it's funny. It may have been my coach, my like pageant days
That's great.
Skill set. Yeah, totally. That also taught me how to be super present because, in order to not fall flat on your face when you're in the top 5 at Miss USA or answering questions on a live show, at Miss Universe, you have to stay present. Like staying present, being in the moment, really listening to what the question is that it's being asked is like, that's what's going to determine if you're going to sink or swim. And it's sort of the same when you're, in that situation as a host. Whether you're interviewing, connecting with the viewers at home, or connecting with all the kids in the studio, like to me that was so special. Like to be able to do that on a daily basis. And these kids, the kids in the audience were the best. They were like such fans, right? I mean, they would wait in line outside in the rain and the snow, whatever the weather was. They were waiting outside. They couldn't wait to get in. Some of them I recognized their faces because they would come in all the time. They were like locals in New York or New Jersey. And, and they'd come in and they would yell out like, I love you. Like they told us that they loved us, which to me was like, that's like, you don't know me. You don't know me, but you're telling me you love me. And like, that it's interesting because that's really when I realized how influential I could be and how my personal choices, right, and what was written up about me in Us Weekly or whatever, like how my choices could either be how I could be a positive influence to these kids, that watched us every single day and would come into the studio as well. And that was actually, they were my inspiration to write my book. I wrote my book in 2007, right after I left MTV because of that, because I'll never forget the day that, there was this young girl, she was probably like 12 and she was in the audience. And when I walked up, on the stage right before the show was going to go live, she was like, Susie, I love you. And I was like, oh, I love you too, and I'm like, this is crazy. Like, this kid feels this connection to me. What can I do? What can I do for her? And that's where
it's Confidence Queen, right? Is that the name of the book?
Confidence is queen. Yes.
Confidence is queen. Yeah.
Yeah. I've got him right there.
Yeah. I love that. And did you come into MTV with the same amount of confidence that you left with?
No, 100% no. I'll never forget. I used to like poop my pants. Or at least I wanted to every time before. And it was Caduce one time because I was like dissecting hosting on TRL, right? And like in my head, like, and making it way more complicated. And Caduce was like, I remember I was hosting with him one day and he was like, Susie, we're not curing cancer. This isn't CNN. Like, we're not reporting hard news. Like, have fun. You know, he's like, let's just go out there and have a good time. And I'm like, yes, Caduce, let's do that. But yeah, no, the more, and then I kind of did an exercise too, Vinny, where early on at MTV, where I would go watch after I would DVR my, MTV TRL or TiVo, back when TiVo was a thing, remember? And then I'd go back to my apartment and I'd watch the episode. And whenever I was just myself, right? Not the Susie that was on the casting tape, just me. And I watched it and I was like, oh, that's kind of boring. Like I wasn't excited to watch, as a viewer. And then I was like, okay, well, when I go back to work tomorrow, I'm going to like elevate it and like add some more energy and see what that looks like. And I did that and I watched it and I was like, okay, that's better. And then the next day I went and I elevated even a little more. And then I kind of found where my energy needed to be, like where my personality needed to be in order for it to be fun to watch. And, and I really cared. In the beginning, when I got there, my confidence level was like, no. Like part of me felt like I have no business being here right now. Like I've never hosted before. That was my first hosting job. I'm like, I'm not worthy. But I kind of
how I felt like I'm the guy, like I'm training and hiring people. And I'm like, I know I've been doing this for like the last few years, so I'm already doing it, but like I wasn't doing this before. So I don't know.
I know it's,
I think we all kind of had some of that like imposter syndrome there. Cause that we were all we weren't necessarily trying to figure out our way, but more figuring out ourselves. We were kind of set up at MTV, and I think I might have taken that for granted, and meaning like it felt like I was going to be at MTV forever because I just thought when you go to a job, you just stay there forever. And then like when I left MTV in 2007, then I got a Gmail email address for my name. But up until 2007, I only had like my AOL email name that I stopped using because I would use my MTV, staff email address or my MTV.com email address. And
right.
It was so mind-blowing to me, that whole entire process.
It was. Yeah. And we were all like in our early 20s too, right? So you're figuring out life and who you really are. And you're doing it all like, for the VJs, it's like you're doing it all in the public eye. And that's scary. And like, we were talking about earlier how, New York City is sometimes a really hard place to live, right? And there takes you have to be a strong person, right? And kind of have some sort of a good sense of self, even if you're still trying to figure it out because you're so young. It takes a certain level of strength and confidence to live in a city like New York when you're from a small town.
You've been listening to I Have a Podcast with me and Susie Castillo. Tune into part 2 of this incredible conversation, and in our next episode, Susie shares some of the opportunities she's had to bring her culture into the mainstream and the challenges and obstacles she's had to overcome to get there. Thanks for listening to I Have a Podcast. For more information about today's episode, visit us at ihaveapodcast.com. If you like what you've heard, follow us or subscribe to be notified of our next episode. And we appreciate any kind reviews.